I'm Jennifer Reed, the Good Dietitian, and this is Healthy, Holy, Whole. And obviously, tonight, in the spirit of the season, I decided to have a little spirited conversation about diets. I know I touch on them and have touched on them in my other podcasts, but I thought I would give it one more shot to try to put the evidence out there because there's a whole lot of opinion and ideology and belief when it comes to diets, but that doesn't actually transfer over into fact or evidence. And so before we get started on that, I just want to make clear this is not my ugly Christmas sweater. This is my super cute Christmas sweater. So if anybody was having an ugly Christmas sweater party this year, I wouldn't be wearing this because this is not an ugly Christmas sweater. This is my super cute Christmas sweater. So, okay, now that that is clear. So again, I've had several recent conversations. And yes, I know that as dietitians, we can sometimes be a little touchy when other people say, yes, I know your job. I can do your job. And then we're like, oh, but then why did I go to school for 6 years? I should have done something else. Well, again, I would just like to take a moment. I've had several conversations where recently people have said things that were like, well, okay, maybe I'll give it one more try and see if I can put anything out there that helps anyone understand what bad diets really are, what they do. Are they the best present ever, or are they really just a lump of coal? So let's just start out with a little bit. Let's just try to, for one last time, talk about carbohydrates and how they don't make us fat. So in all of our research, there's never ever been a study that has actually proven, yes, 100% carbohydrates in and of themselves causes weight gain. And because you have to think about all of the components of what carbohydrates are. For example, we have to think about how many actual molecules fit under the title of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are one of the three main building blocks, also known as one of our macronutrients, and they make up all food, including protein and fat. These macronutrients are essential to the body's function. Carbs can actually be split into three different groups, just like proteins and fats also can be split off into other groups. So when you say I'm eating protein or eating fat, well, okay, but there's also other nutrients underneath those categories as well. But under carbohydrates, we have sugars. They're simply just short chain compounds, monosaccharides and disaccharides. Starch, which is just a longer chain of compounds, and then dietary fiber. But remember, almost all foods that people call carbohydrates actually contain a combination of the three carbs with a protein and a fat. And so apart from table sugar, it's rare to find something that's purely a carb. It just doesn't work that way in food. So, of course, some foods that contain carbohydrates and sugars are more nutritious than others. So, for example, I think we all can say, yes, this apple is more nutritional value than this piece of cake. But when it comes to carbs and sugars, they're exactly the same. Inside the body, they're broken down into the same blood sugar. There's not different types of blood sugars based on different types of food. Obviously, how some get digested can make a difference sometimes. But again, it doesn't work the same for everyone because there's only one of me, there's only one of you. And so foods react differently inside of everyone. My patients, for example, I have several patients who can't eat sweet potatoes. They raise their blood sugars, but white potatoes don't raise their blood sugars, and then vice versa. So again, there's not an absolute sometimes in how different foods and carbs are going to affect people. But what kicked everything off? Where did this whole idea that carbs really kind of make us fat? Well, we have this thing called the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis of obesity. So this essentially was saying carbs make us produce more insulin, and that increases the fat storage. However, that is something that we can study in a lab. We have and can prove. And so hypotheses in science are made to be tested. The problem with this particular one is that it's been falsified or proven incorrect on multiple occasions, yet those who hold on to carbohydrates being responsible for obesity have built massive careers off of it and would have way too much to lose if they come back from that. And we're going to talk about that quickly in just a moment as well. It's like, okay, so where's the money lie with all of this? Because there's big money to be had in the diet world and the diet business. So money, essentially, sometimes you also have to, in studies, can sometimes ruin those studies as well, because then it's not really objective science. Or if you as the researcher absolutely is holding on to, okay, this is what I believe, well, that also can bias that research. In fact, some researchers got together in the nutrition science world recently, and they combed through millions of studies. And out of that, sadly, they said maybe a few hundred were good enough and large enough to actually be viable. So then that gives us a whole lot of studies with no actualities and no facts. So again, unfortunately though, when theory becomes dogma, when we actually hold on to it like it's our identity, and this is what we have to believe, and this is what we're going to believe regardless. And so people usually freak out about the fact that, okay, so insulin, so once we eat something that contains carbohydrates, insulin's job is to signal the liver to store excess glucose. It's glycogen. The liver can only store a certain amount of glycogen at one time. So anything extra then can convert it to fat for long-term storage, also under the control of insulin. And so that's where people get really freaked out on thinking fat storage is both normal and essential for proper function of the body. Fat storage and fat breakdown, the whole thing is in a constant state of flux. I know it's a lot of stuff, and you're probably not going to remember that or take that away, but just know that as glucose is the brain's preferential, it's our brain's best source of fuel. Let's say that. There are many mechanisms in place to keep our blood glucose levels stable, and it's a no-brainer, pun intended. So when these mechanisms aren't functioning properly, in conditions such as diabetes or health tends to kind of suffer. And so there are health conditions that we have to take into consideration as well. And so diets don't do that though. So diets focus on a one size fits all. And so if it's good for me, it must be good for everybody else. And again, that's not how it works. We have to take into consideration other things that are going on medically with the person and what's going on inside the body. So the theory that insulin stimulation directly causes weight gain can be tested by comparing rates of weight loss between people on a high carb diet and people on a low carb diet when calories and protein are kept the same. Okay, so if the theory is correct, those on the low carb diet should lose more weight due to lower stimulation of insulin, right? Well, if we look at the results of this particular study, and this is just one, and we also have a sample daily menu. So this is one side is the low carb diet, the other side is the baseline diet. But after the first 4 weeks on the high carb diet, participants lost 1.1 pounds or 0.5 kilograms of body fat on average. Switching to the low carb diet for the remaining 4 weeks led to a dip in insulin levels by almost half. However, once again, participants only lost 1.1 pounds of body fat. So essentially, there was no difference. So the best way to test these sort of controlled feeding studies, again, we can't use anecdotal data. Okay, so we can't, which is what all diets do. So they'll have somebody on their commercial that's lost this amount of weight. But is that real science? And is that real weight? How much was that water weight? How much was the actual weight? So we have the first rule of nutrition science is don't talk about your own dietary choices. So we have a problem in the scientific community, and I have talked about this before, in the sense that low carb has become a part of one's identity with the rise of low carb doctors, even low carb dietitians. And so because we are putting our foot down and standing on that, we can't move, we can't change. So in the end, people get all of this incorrect information. So despite all the available evidence that says the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis of obesity is just not factually true, we still preach it and teach it and people still buy it. But again, if we go to this next slide, and again, I don't expect very many of you to get this next slide as far as the specifics of it, but if you look at it, in conclusion, ketogenic diets do not have a metabolic advantage over isocaloric high carbohydrate diets when protein and intake is matched. And this study was done by researchers who actually put, they were for low carb, sort of keto type of diets. But when we looked at it, it's been tested, and researchers found that both carbohydrate and fat overeating, caused almost identical increases in body weight, fat mass, and lean mass. So carbs alone do not make us fat. These increases did not differ between the lean and obese subjects either. So again, overeating is what gets us. It's not carbs, you guys. It's not. It's simply that we have more access to food than we've ever had before. And if you look at how people sort of identify with diets, it's not always, okay, well, let me think about myself and my health. Sometimes it is, let me think about how I look. But if we really truly had a specific combination of diets that actually worked, if we really knew, for example, that cutting this or that out actually made a difference, we would have it by now. We would have that magical combination. And yes, diets, pretty much all diets across the board will promote weight loss. And anytime you lose weight, yes, your labs can look better. Your cholesterol can look better. Your blood pressure can be better. Your blood sugars can be better. All of those things can and do look better, but it's because of the weight loss, not the magical combination of the diet that caused the weight loss. Because all diets will, because they're taking out entire groups of calories. So if you look at another study, and this came out in 2018, and it was done on nearly 500,000 people. And so what they found, so scientists and dietitians got together, and so what they found was that filling our plates with plants, including vegetables, whole grains, healthy fats, and legumes, and sort of getting away from some of those highly processed foods actually is as good as anything else. There's absolutely nothing more important for our health than what we eat every day. But this study covered 447,000 people from around the world. And what they discovered was it was probably not a huge surprise that no matter where you live, what your daily diet is like, banning an entire food group and thinking you can cheat your way to health might work for a little while, but could also send you to an early grave. So this popular ketogenic diet, which involves strictly limiting carbs to less than 50 grams a day, which is no more than 2 apples, is subsisting primarily on high-fat foods in one of those restricted diets that could potentially have long-term consequences. Other low-carb weight loss diets that fall in this category include Paleo, Atkins, Dukan, and Whole30. Although I just have to put this in about Whole30. So you guys do realize that you put your entire life and your nutritional health status in the hands of two people who basically had zero education in nutrition science, like none. So they just it's sort of like taking Atkins and adding and taking away some things, and they developed this concept called the Whole30. But some of the foods that they tell people not to eat, now I'm not saying the whole thing is bad, but some of the foods like beans, well, those are what keep people in other places around the world healthier than anybody else. There's nothing wrong with beans. They've been a staple for generations, and they're good, and they're good foods, and they provide nutrients, and they're not harmful. But that particular diet put them out. And so that should be also sort of a gotcha or an aha moment to say, oh, well, maybe I don't need to follow that because maybe it's not 100% true. Anyway, I digress. So following all of these, and I think it's fair to say that some benefits of going keto are obviously difficult to dispute as far as rapid weight loss and blood sugar control. But the keto diet has mostly been beneficial for children since the 40s for epilepsy. And that's where it's really been the most helpful. But there is some limited evidence that going low carb might also lead people to become less tolerant of glucose and develop diabetes. Now, obviously, we need more research. But what we do know based on careful conducted laboratory testing of overweight men is that going keto probably doesn't help burn more body fat than a regular diet. Instead, it forces people to dramatically curb their sugar intake and kick processed foods to the curb, which is not a bad thing. Again, both of those are good. But why, like taking an aspirin, eating a special high-fat, low-carb diet probably shouldn't be an everyday habit for otherwise healthy people. Our bodies simply aren't designed to fuel up on fats unless we're literally starving. So there was a study, just on your own. There's a really great study. I think it was World War One or two. There was a study done where they literally, so if you didn't go to fight, you could sign up to do this and they starved. They actually did testing and starved these men, and the results are amazing to actually see what happened. But that's what happens when we sort of take out. So even Josh Axe, who's a keto evangelist, has said that the keto is not a diet that should be followed for more than a few months at a time, because you are missing key nutrients like magnesium, calcium, and potassium, and fiber. We really need to find a way, because the researchers actually presented at the conference, this major conference, and found that, again, it's just not good, and not going to work forever. And unfortunately, it does increase risks of certain types of deadly cancers, including colon, stomach, lung, liver, and breast cancers. Because again, we're cutting out entire amazing food groups like fresh fruits, vegetables, legumes, and nuts that are super beneficial to decreasing those types of chronic diseases. And so keto, again, not maybe the best healthy for a lifelong type of diet. If we look at the blue zones, again, people live longer there than anywhere else, and they're eating low protein and high carb. That's just straight science. That's not belief, ideology, and or opinion. And I know that some people, no matter what I say, will still carry the opinion that I'm going to do a fad diet. Well, let me just give you some quick statistics on obesity as a big moneymaker in America, and how diet and supplement companies, along with food industry, have financially benefited off of the obesity epidemic. So here's some food for thought. In the late 1990s, the cutoff point for being overweight from the BMI, which again, I'll reiterate, the BMI is gender and racially biased. But overnight, they cut that down from 27 to 25. So overnight, millions of Americans became overweight, whether they were sick or not. And we now had an epidemic where bring on the weight loss drugs and products. And that opened a whole new door. So low fat, light, lean diet, zero, low carb, low sugar, sugar free, all of those hit the market. And the food industry took notice of overeating and wishes to simply take a pill or drink a drink or eat a diet food and bought into the diet industry. So I think how many different diets you've tried and all the products you purchased to be on that diet. Dieters are repeat customers to the tune of $66 billion a year. And so, for example, the company that owns Ben & Jerry ice cream also owns Slim Fast. Nestle owns Jenny Craig. So they're making products over here to help get you overweight or obese, and then they're making the products to help get you slim again. And so a quote from former finance director of Weight Watchers, Richard Samber, says it's successful. Weight Watchers is successful because the 84% who can't keep the weight off keep coming back. So they're dependent on you being a repeat customer. So we have consumers, one is overweight, many who go on endless diets, losing and then regain the weight and provide a constant revenue stream for both the food industry and the diet industry for the whole adult lives. So think about how many diets throughout your adult life you have done, how much you have tried, and how much money you put into that. And they're more than happy to keep taking that money because, again, the majority of us will gain that weight back. And one last thing. So I feel like as a licensed practitioner, I feel like we need to have more transparency from the food and supplement and diet world. So if you make up your own diet, just like Miracle Whip, I don't know if you guys know this, but around 1993, Miracle Whip was, saying, okay, well, it's Miracle Whip Light, but it wasn't actually lighter in fat or calories. It was just light in color. So they were tricking us. Or wheat bread, when it first hit the market, wasn't actually wheat bread. It was just white bread caramel color. And so the government stepped in and said, oh, you can do that. If you're going to make that claim, you actually have to have something to back that up. But we don't hold diets and diet gurus to the same standard. But we are starting to. So last year, Australians have called for their government to actually put some regulation on weight loss programs because the same thing's happening in Australia that's happening here in America. We're getting heavier with more diets. So something's not working. And so they want their government to hold diets more accountable. I think that's only fair. You shouldn't be able to make a claim based on anecdotal information. You should actually, if whatever you say it does, you should be able to back it up. And we're finally starting to hold supplement companies in America accountable as well. So the FDA finally curbs unfounded memory supplement claims. I hope I didn't just burst anybody's bubble out there. My aging brain is hurting as well. But these supplement companies that were claiming, I won't say which one, but they were making these claims that were absolutely scientifically unfounded. And so the government finally stepped in and said, yeah, you can't do that anymore. You got to actually have something else. Now, how much that's going to affect, I don't know, because I still sometimes see those commercials, but we're going in the right direction. And I feel like I should actually be working with the government to help hold these programs more accountable as well. So I know that this is probably not everyone else's favorite topic, especially if you were on one of those diets or you have done those diets and you lost weight and you felt good and you look good. But again, ask yourself, what nutrients or nutrition might you be losing? What might you not be getting? And how many times have you done the diet? How many times have you lost the weight, gained the weight? And wouldn't it be nice to not have to do that? Wouldn't it be nice to just eat normal and to not be afraid, to not think, oh, this food's good, this food's bad? There really are no good or bad foods. And I don't have time to cover it today, really. So I'll just briefly mention it and then cover it in the new year. But I wanted to cover Matt Fitzgerald. So Matt Fitzgerald is not a licensed nutritionist. He is an athlete and a trainer and a triathlete, and he's written several books. And I come across his information in one of his books called Diet Cults. And the way he explained, so he sort of took a look at diets and dieters from an anthropological perspective. And it was very interesting to me because he looked at people, and it was almost as if with diets, it's almost like a religion, and we base our morality and our identities in these diets. And people become very opinionated, and people have very strong feelings. But again, as a licensed practitioner, I can't go by my feelings. I can't go by. I mean, I seem very opinionated about these things, but I'm backing it up by science, because like my dad used to say, opinions are kind of like a certain area of the body. Everybody has one, but opinion doesn't always transfer over into fact. And you would not read an article on the internet and then go and perform open heart surgery on yourself or a relative because, well, now you've read an article and now you know how to do that job. And nutrition science really is a science. And I'm not trying to demean anybody or be mean to anybody, but we're hurting. America is no healthier today than it was 20 years ago. Yet again, we have every diet imaginable. And if we're talking about believers, if we're talking about ourselves as believers in Jesus Christ, then we also have to think about the biblical implications of an unhealthy relationship with food. And we have to stop blaming food, and we have to realize what is our part in our eating and or our overeating. And don't we need to just nourish, because this is the temple. We have to take care of it. And just as we cannot shortcut our way to a better spiritual relationship, we can't shortcut our way to a healthier body. We can't drink a drink. We can't take a pill. We cannot cut out a food or an entire food. We can't do that for a better, healthier health. And again, instead of always focusing on the weight, instead of always focusing on how we look, we really should just be focused on being healthy on the inside. Because if we're constantly trying to chase that weight, we're going to constantly end up on the losing end. No pun intended. So thank you guys again. I hope that you tuned in. I hope that you didn't tune out. Here's hoping to a much better new year for everyone. Stay safe and have a wonderful Christmas. Thanks.